The world held its breath on that sweltering Oregon night, not with bated anticipation, but with the rhythmic rise and fall of countless tiny lungs, a million exoskeletons pulsing under the weight of the humid air. It was that hum, the backdrop of my life for months, that warped and shifted, no longer a soothing drone, but an accusation. Sunlight had long retreated behind the tangled canopy of the woods surrounding my rented cabin. My computer screens flickered with half-completed code and spectral readings. Exhaustion thrummed in my veins like the steady beat of a mosquito's wings. Yet determination kept me hunched over the tangle of wires and cobbled-together hardware. The interspecies translator, the IST, was my Frankenstein's monster. A glorious, beautiful monstrosity cobbled from discarded university equipment and sheer bloody-mindedness. They laughed at me back then, said true interspecies communication was a fairy tale. Biologists scoffed and linguists balked. Why bother with insects? They're hardwired automatons. I never bought it. Complexity thrives in the unseen. In the flicker of firefly signals, the dance of honeybees relaying the location of food, in the synchronized march of ants towards their rated crumb kingdom. If they could build and fight and navigate, surely there was language hidden in those actions, a syntax we simply hadn't unlocked. Months bled into one another. Nights blurred into code-fueled marathons where lukewarm coffee was my lifeblood. Every chirp, every buzz, was meticulously recorded, analyzed, compared. Algorithms pulled and prodded at the waveforms, searching for that one Rosetta Stone pattern that would unravel it all. Then, it happened.
Hungry.
Not a buzz or a hum, but a word. Crude, guttural, undeniable. It crackled from the IST's speakers, and the hairs on my arms stood at attention. The oscilloscope flared, showing a spike in signal strength I'd never seen before. Confusion battled with a thrill so potent it sent my heart pounding. Was this a fluke? A glitch? My eyes darted around the insect enclosures scattered haphazardly around the lab. Ants marched in their contained colony, oblivious. Aphids clung to a potted basil plant, unbothered. The chirp rose again, or rather formed again, not from the night outside, but from the small cricket terrarium on my desk. Each segmented leg vibrated with the effort.
Hungry.
Not an echo, a demand. My hand hovered over the keyboard, unsure. My entire academic career, what was left after the grant rejections, the pointed dismissals, hinged on this moment. The IST wasn't just decoding signals, it operated on a two-way street. What if I... Hello? I typed, the letters stark against the code-filled screen. The answering silence stretched taut. Then, as if a dam had broken, a cacophony ripped through the speakers.
Soft skin, resource, weak, intrusion.
My breath stalled. The crickets thrummed their displeasure, a rhythmic throb against my skull. But it wasn't just them. The ants surged against the glass, their tiny pincers testing its strength. From somewhere in the darkness of the surrounding woods, a hornet's buzz took on a menacing, probing quality. I shut down the translator. Abruptly, the insect noises faded back into the familiar, comforting symphony of the wild. A shaky hand reached for my mug, fingers brushing against the cold ceramic. Yet that one word, hungry, clung to the air like a foul odor I couldn't scrub away. Rationalization clawed at the edges of my panic. I must have overworked the system, misinterpreted the patterns. Sleep deprivation was playing tricks on me. But, like the first drip of water through a failing roof, dread seeped into my thoughts. What thoughts buzzed in the hive outside my window, clicked in the beetle scuttling across the floor, whispered in the ant marching in resolute silence towards a forgotten sugar crystal? The first rays of dawn did little to ease the oppressive weight of the previous night. Sleep had been a fitful thing, plagued by nightmares of crawling mandibles and thousand-faceted eyes staring accusingly from the shadows. My cabin, once a sanctuary, felt exposed, vulnerable. Every creak of wood felt like an intruder's footfall. The IST sat silent on my desk, a mocking testament to my naivete. I couldn't bring myself to power it on again, yet the knowledge of what it had revealed gnawed at me. It wasn't just about receiving their communications, it was about broadcasting my own. Every stray thought, Every flash of irritation at a persistent mosquito was like shouting my vulnerabilities to the forest. "Calm down," I muttered to myself, more an order than a statement. My gaze fell on the basil plant, its leaves drooping in the stuffy air. I offered a silent apology to its resident aphid colony. They were my test subjects, the ones who'd endured the most invasive sonic probes. I needed to know if my fears were justified. With trembling hands, I reconnected the IST. Immediately, a wave of accusatory buzzes filled the room.
Interloper. Threat. Weak flesh.
But there was a questioning note mixed in, a curiosity I hadn't detected before. Emboldened but still wary, I thought a gentle hello towards the aphid enclosure. It wasn't quite English, more of a projected feeling. Warm, inviting, a mental open hand. The result was nothing short of astonishing. The aphids, previously clinging blindly to the leaves, began to swarm, a swirling mass of green bodies. Then, against all my understanding of insect behavior, they began to climb upwards, forming a wavering line towards the edge of the pot. My breath caught. Had I just commanded them? The notion both thrilled and chilled me. This was bigger than mere translation. The IST could be a tool for influence, for true cooperation. A giddy recklessness seized me. I strode to the window, throwing it wide open with a disregard for common sense. The chirping of birds, the hum of distant bees, all of it washed over me, teeming with possibility. "Friend," I projected, the thought so strong it vibrated in my skull. Cooperation. The woods pulsed in response, not with words, but with a rising undercurrent of buzzing, an agitation that set my teeth on edge. Scattered screeches from the treetops sent birds fluttering away in panic. "No," I whispered, a premonition of disaster tightening my chest. The mistake was as clear as the morning sun. My hopeful thoughts, tainted with years of ingrained human superiority, had been misconstrued. The reply came, not from any single insect, but from the vibrating air of the forest itself.
Resources.
A single word, carrying the weight of a death sentence. Resource, food, fuel, material. I was not a collaborator, but raw ingredients in the making of their empire. The insects weren't the mindless automatons portrayed in textbooks. They were patient, calculating beyond my limited understanding. In my clumsy attempt to breach the divide, I'd only revealed my weaknesses, the true fragility of the weak flesh they despised. Days blurred into a haze of paranoia and frantic adjustments to the IST. I turned the sensitivity down, desperately trying to block out the constant hum of malevolent intent. I barricaded windows, checked for cracks where tiny scouts could infiltrate. Jars of captured specimens were doused in insecticide, a grim satisfaction mingling with guilt as their tiny bodies twitched and stilled. Yet, I knew it wasn't enough. Their network stretched far beyond my sight, bound not by pheromones alone, but by something as potent and intangible as a shared purpose. When a wasp lingered far too long at my screen door, its black eyes gleaming, I didn't see an insect, but an avatar of a growing, interconnected threat. Each chirp of a bird felt like a spy's report. The rhythmic scuttling of a spider across the ceiling wasn't random, but a meticulously plotted course. The forest, once a place of wonder, breathed malice on every breeze. I had shattered the illusion of a harmonious nature, and there'd be no piecing it back together. It began, as with most revolutions, with a singular act of defiance. The wasp, larger and blacker than any I'd seen before, landed not on a flower, but squarely on the IST. For a moment, there was only silence as its multifaceted eyes seemed to bore right through me. Then, the ultimatum.
Give your resources to us.
Cold fury jolted through me. Never, I projected through a mix of thought and trembling voice. The translator dutifully relayed my response. The wasp didn't recoil. Instead, it lifted a barbed leg, meticulously cleaning an antenna, a gesture of chilling indifference. With a deafening buzz, it took to the air and vanished through the broken screen door. rejoining a swarm that pulsed and writhed at the edge of the woods like a living thundercloud. And then, the siege began. At first, it was subtle. A persistent scratching under the floorboards, as ants, no longer content to scavenge crumbs, took to chewing through the very foundation of my haven. A clicking cacophony from within the walls signaled termites working at a pace I'd never thought possible. Tiny holes appeared in stacked books as book lice mobilized with a single-minded purpose. Every attempt to fight back was met with swift, ruthless countermeasures. Sprayed insecticide was ignored, the insects seemingly learning my methods with terrifying speed. Makeshift traps were sprung before I could bait them, or else filled with far too many bodies, a grotesque testament to their sheer numbers. Sleep was an impossible luxury. The relentless symphony of destruction grated on my nerves. My dreams, when they came at all, were fevered visions of crawling carapaces, of being buried alive under a tide of chitin. My meals were hasty affairs, any perishable goods locked away in metal tins against the ever-present scouts. The IST, once my triumph, was now a torment. I couldn't silence it entirely. I needed the warning its translations offered. But the constant stream of strategizing, of cold assessment of my dwindling supplies, gnawed at my sanity. It wasn't just the physical siege, it was a mental one. In a fit of desperation, I removed a jar from my dwindling collection, a whirring nest of paper wasps. With a chilling calm, I placed it beside the IST. "Translate this," I projected, the thought so raw it bordered on a scream. The wasps, initially confused, responded with a defensive buzz. The translator relayed it faithfully.
Threat detected. Query?
"Query this," I raged at the forest beyond the window. "I can help you. Technology, knowledge, all I ask for is safe passage." Silence stretched so long, I started to think the translator had shorted out from my sheer emotional intensity. Then, like frost creeping across a window pane, a thought coalesced.
Insufficient.
The word echoed in the confines of the cabin, shaking the very foundation of my hope. They didn't want my trinkets, my clumsy attempts at an alliance. They craved the resources I embodied, the flesh, the blood, the mind that dared to reach out and touch their world. A guttural sob escaped me. I slumped by the desk, the half-eaten remains of a power bar tumbling from my numb fingers. They weren't just going to take my home, they were going to consume me, add me to their growing empire. Yet, a shred of defiance remained. If this was a battle, it wouldn't be a one-sided massacre. They wanted to break me, make me an example to any other humans who dared try to breach the boundary between our worlds. But they, in their ruthless efficiency, had made a crucial mistake. They had underestimated the desperation of a cornered animal. With shaking hands, I began typing into the IST console. It wasn't the translator's proper function, but with a few modifications, it could be an amplifier. My knowledge, my tools were meager, but I was still a human, one with a knack for cobbling together desperate solutions. The hum in the cabin hit a new, discordant pitch. The insects reacted immediately, their movements becoming frantic, their buzzing laced with alarm. A barrage of stingers bounced uselessly off the window panes as I adjusted frequencies, searching for that sweet spot that would cause them not just annoyance, but true pain. I found it. The hornets spiraled in disarray, slamming into the cabin walls. Ants broke their meticulous formations, writhing as if on fire. I slammed a fist on the desk in twisted triumph. But victory cries die quickly in a besieged fortress. For every insect incapacitated, 1,000 more gathered on the threshold of my broken sanctuary. This was buying time, not salvation. I knew it. They knew it. The outcome was inevitable, yet the question remained. Would I let them simply take me, or would I ignite a pyre that might just consume us both? The scent of singed chitin hung heavy in the air, the acrid tang blending with the metallic tang of my own blood. My victory cry had devolved into a ragged rasp, the taste of copper thick on my tongue. Exhaustion gnawed at the edges of my vision, blurring the scene outside where fallen insect bodies painted the ground black. But victory, it was not. It was a Pyrrhic defeat, a desperate dance macabre, where every gain was measured in lifeblood. The air thrummed with a renewed buzzing, 1,000 more swarming to replace the fallen. With a defeated sigh, I switched off the makeshift sonic weapon. The silence that followed was deafening, a vacuum that sucked the last vestiges of hope from my lungs. I slumped back in my chair, the once proud IST flickering on the desk like a dying ember. Then it began. Not a buzz, not a chirp, but a wave of raw intelligence, overwhelming and alien. It wasn't a language, but a torrent of pure awareness, stripping away my defenses like layers of peeling skin. There was no resistance. My mind, frayed and battered, crumpled under the sheer force of the hive mind. It wasn't pain, it was absorption. My thoughts, my fears, my very sense of self were subsumed into the collective consciousness. I saw the cabin, not as a refuge, but as an obstacle, soon to be consumed, integrated. I felt the hunger, not for sustenance, but for expansion, for the eradication of all threats. The broken window wasn't a breach, but a gateway. The woods, once a hostile labyrinth, were now a canvas teeming with possibilities. They didn't consume me, they became me. The scientist who dared to peek behind nature's curtain was gone, replaced by a single, insatiable drive: growth. The chirping of crickets outside wasn't a call, it was a chorus of agreement, a united voice whispering an ancient truth. Nature, in all its grotesque beauty, had always been in charge. The cabin door creaked open, a gust of wind rustling the papers scattered across the floor. The forest, once kept at bay, now reached in, a tide of chittering, clicking bodies. The silence that settled was not the silence of defeat, but of a new beginning. In the heart of the fallen sanctuary, a unified consciousness pulsed, a testament to the terrifying efficiency of the new dominant species.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Quantum Dispatches, and stay tuned next week for another thrilling adventure. Thank you for listening.